Hello, welcome. Welcome to the Power Map Artist panel. Really excited to spend this time with you tonight and to introduce you to some of the artists who have been working diligently to produce a project called Power Map over the last year and a half. My name is Daniel Tucker, and over that period of time, I have been a curator in residence with Mural Arts Philadelphia and have been charged with developing this project. Power Map is focused around 5 early murals in Mural Arts Philadelphia's history. And something that interested me about these murals was that they were created really before Mural Arts had formalized a lot of their processes around community engagement. And these murals were selected in particular because they represent aesthetic strategies for how to depict power and empowerment. And so that really became the through line of this project. The approach that you're going to hear described tonight is that 5 artists and artist groups were given one of those early mural arts murals as a prompt to develop a new project, and we called these historic mural activations. You see some examples of what they turned into here. You're going to hear a description of them tonight from the artists. I'm really thrilled that after making a project during a truly unusual year, when a lot of our efforts to get together and convene were thwarted and compromised, that we can all get together tonight and that I can introduce you to this incredible group of people who have been developing the Power Map historic mural activations over the last year and a half. And so I'm just going to read some short bios, and then I'm going to hand off the mic to the artist. So first we're going to hear from Courtney Bowles and Mark Strandquist, who have spent years using art as a vehicle to amplify, celebrate, and power social justice movements. They currently work with the People's Paper Co-op and Reentry Think Tank here in Philly. 22 Studio is a transdisciplinary design practice co-founded and co-directed by Marianne Velez and Nichelle Ortiz, who work with architectural, scenic, and social lighting design, fashion design, stage design, and public art. Ken McFarland is a West Philadelphia-based documentary and portrait photographer, and he has spent 20 years working in commercial editorial and documentary photography and filmmaking. Eva Woe is a multidisciplinary artist from New Mexico who's been based in Philadelphia since 2010. Woe uses photography, collage, and moving image to cast spells of vibrant queer liberation somewhere between fantasy and futurism. And Marie Alarcon is an experimental video artist trained in documentary filmmaking, and their work has been screened in festivals and galleries, including Black Star Film Festival here in Philadelphia, Harlem International Film Fest, and the San Francisco Urban Film Fest. And so the way that tonight is going to work is that I'm going to pose questions to each of the artists, and that'll help us walk through their project and how they participated in Power Map. So I'm going to start with Mark Strandquist and Courtney Bowles. But really the question is the same for everybody. I want you to tell us how you responded to the original mural and how you used it as a prompt in your work.
Hi everybody, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Mark.
So in July of last year of 2019, which feels like at least 700 lifetimes ago, we had the amazing chance to collaborate with folks from the Tripod program, which is an ongoing program of Writers' Room at Drexel that connects high school students, Drexel students, and older community members to create a series of projects that inspired by the mural Boy with a Raised Arm at the corner of 40th and Powelton. So we've biked by this mural 1,000 times, and the powerful imagery combined with the Walt Whitman reference has always made it one of our favorites. And we were really excited to work with folks to activate it. So in a neighborhood that is increasingly facing threats of gentrification and displacement, we were interested in creating a series of photographic projects that both visualized and amplified the dreams of long-term residents who have seen so many shifts happen around them, and also younger generations. The mural itself says, I am large, I contain multitudes, and we changed that to say, we exist in multitudes, which is just another way of saying, see me and support the multitude of possible futures that we can create together, while also respecting our diverse paths and pasts and our shared presence.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, as you're seeing the banner that was just up on the screen, you know, I think in a moment where so much of us are using our cell phones or whatever devices we have to create, you know, hundreds, sometimes thousands of photos a year, we wanted to really slow down the process to make it very, to make the act of creating one image a collaborative process that each one of these photos you see required, you know, 5 to 7 people to create. And along that process, people were sharing about the complexities of their identities, the complexities of their past, and the multiplicities of like the futures that they're dreaming of. And so the camera and the photo becomes almost like a stage to kind of bring people together to collaboratively create each of these images. And so for us, you know, we were super inspired by not only like the ideas behind the original mural, but that concept of like, you know, all of us, you know, we all have a multitude of identities, and so like we wanted to create a process where people across generation, across difference could come together, which we were able to come together pre-pandemic, which was amazing to be in person to create these, and really use it as a stage to kind of have people open up and build something together.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mark and Courtney. I'd love to hear now from 22 Studio, Nichelle and Marianne, who activated this mural. Nichelle and Marianne, can you tell us how you responded to the original mural and how you used it as a prompt?
Hi, my name is Nichelle, she, her. My name is Marianne, also she, her. So the original mural represents the occupation of the Statue of Liberty decades ago by a political activist group who demanded independence for Puerto Rico by hanging the Puerto Rican flag in the Statue of Liberty. So for us, the prompt was appropriation and colonization, right? And how we could comment on the political status of Puerto Rico, even, you know, nowadays. So the intervention was based on basically repeating or symbolizing the event in the mural in Philadelphia, but adding a visual and symbolic layer addressing the issues during the 2019 summer when the people pressured the governor to resign due to a chat leak where we learned levels of power were filled with corruption and you know, many biases against women, against queer community, etc., etc., etc.
But I think it's also important to understand a little about the history of Puerto Rico and the flag. and why Puerto Ricans are always with the flag. After the US invasion, we had the God law, where every Puerto Rican was prohibited to use any national symbol to lower the risk of a revolution from the people, the independentists. And also we see that in 2006, el colectivo, the collective La Puerta, painted the flag in black and white as a protest and a resistance symbol for the austerity measurements and imposition of the Control Fiscal Board by the United States. And also we're portraying the woman, because the woman has been very important in Puerto Rican history in the demanding of a resolution of the colonial status of the island, and playing with the words in Spanish, La Estatua de la Libertad, that is a female gender presentation. We put the faces of liberty of our Puerto Rican women.
Thanks so much, Nichelle and Marianne. Participating in this activation was a lot of fun. Advance now to the Dr. J mural and invite Ken McFarland. Ken, if you could tell us, respond to the same question, how did you engage the original mural and use it as a prompt in your work?
Oh, good evening, everyone. First of all, I just want to say it's really great to be here with these other 4 artists, and I have history with nearly all of the 5 murals, but this one in particularly. I used to live in this neighborhood in the 90s. I used to live actually closer to the Puerto Rican Statue of Liberty. I used to live on 16th and Mount Vernon. So, and I had friends that lived on maybe 11th, 12th and Wallace. So these 2 murals are not strangers to me. Dr. J and the mural of Dr. J by Ken Twitchell in particularly stood out to me because before I came to Philadelphia, I only knew very few things about Philadelphia. Sound of Philadelphia, the music that came out with the green labels that, my parents had. I knew about the Move bombing, and I knew that Dr. J played for the Sixers. But to see him outside of the stereotypical presentation of athletes, and to see him stand some 30 some odd feet in the sky, stopped me nearly every time. And it became my favorite mural because of proximity, but also because of the power that when you present Black people with strength and dignity, it has its own power, whether we're aware of it or not. So the image reflects how we imagine ourselves. So although he is an icon, Ken Twitchell, as I understood it through the research, didn't want to present him with his uniform on. And I think it's a strong choice because it makes someone large even larger. And in the research through Daniel, I found out that that Dr. J cried when he saw it, because regardless of who you are, what you've done, to see yourself presented with power and dignity is a magnificent thing. So that's pretty much it. And I brought in this is Eric Honesty II. I've worked with him and his father a number of times over the years, and we developed a relationship. So initially, I was going to do a project with the entrepreneurs with mural art, and do more of a collaboration. But in the last moments, it came to me because I felt I was in my teenage years when I first saw the mural, and I thought about the impact it had on me, and that the potential impact it has on young people and how they imagine themselves, which is powerful in itself. So we brought him in and we created this this photograph as well as a very short film to commemorate the historic thing that we did. So that's pretty much it, I think.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ken. Yeah. This, you know, Ken shot that photo just, you know, days before the shutdown. And so, you know, really when we think about this being a project that happened over the course of you know, around 18 months, Mark and Courtney and 22 Studio really happened pre-pandemic. Ken happened right when it was, you know, starting to go down. And then our next two artists, Eva and Marie, really had to think about their projects in a completely different way as sort of projects that were born during quarantine. And so I'd like to invite Eva to come and tell us about how you responded to the original mural and use it as a prompt.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. So I was tasked with responding to Pride in Progress by Ann Northrup. Pride in Progress is on the side of the William Way building, and William Way is a community center that I'm a big fan of. So I was really happy to engage with this location. Apparently this mural is one of the first largest LGBTQ public pieces of art in the United States. And in my research, I found out that the artist Ann Northrup actually isn't queer or gay or even part of the queer community. She's not really like, you know, her friends aren't gay. And I felt like that visually was apparent in looking at this mural. So I really wanted to make kind of an alternative offering, to make an image that did feel like that was truly filled with the folks from the LGBTQ community, queer folks, trans folks, and to sort of just put an alternative vision for what representation might look like now for somebody who is living in the city and is part of the queer community. And then along with the image, which is this one, I published a zine that's like 70 something pages that includes interviews with quite a few of the folks who are posing in the mural, because I use a lot of activists and artists and other people who are somebody about town. And I was really interested to ask and kind of find out, do people care about representation? You know, there's a lot of talk about it, and also it only goes so far. So what do folks that I'm working with feel about it, and how do they care? And I pretty much found out that everybody does care, but that it's really hard to find good representation anywhere. So yeah, I can say more later.
Yeah.
That's it.
Great, thanks, Eva. Yeah, if you all, if you haven't done so already, get on the publicartarchive.org/powermap online catalog and follow the link to these videos and to Eva's zine, and so you can read it and learn from these folks. Now I'd like to invite Marie Alarcon to talk about how you engage the Black Family Reunion mural and use it as a prompt for your work.
Hi, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. So yes, thank you for having me.
You're a little quiet, Marie. Maybe you can speak into the mic a little more.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for inviting me into this project. I would say that coming in, it's always, for me as an artist who is trained in documentary, but who thinks of themselves as an experimental documentarian or experimental video artist, there's always a lot of anxiety for me when I go into a project, thinking about how am I going to represent a story that's not necessarily directly my own. How am I going to represent folks that I'm going to be interviewing? And so when when COVID happened, and I was thinking about how I was going to like sort of represent folks and who I was going to talk to in terms of family, I thought a lot about like what it would mean to do a response that was specifically about queerness within Black family. I wasn't really sure. I did a lot of like sort of going down these sort of false paths, thinking about the way that the mural itself had been created and who had created it. And so I ended up using my resources as someone who's been in West Philadelphia for the past almost 15 years, but who is very aware of the fact that I'm not actually from Philly. And interviewed folks who had a very strong connection to the general area where that mural is, which is sort of the bottom, which ranges from the top of the bottom to the Black bottom. And I know a lot of folks know a little bit about the history, but it's a historically Black neighborhood that has been sort of being pushed for a really long time. I thought it was important to think about the ways in which the demographics have flipped and flopped over the decades, and think about the folks who are sort of invested in that space still today, even if they've been displaced, even if they've left, and what it means to come back to a place that is constantly changing, but that you still consider to be your home. And so with that, I decided to interview the folks. Ken actually introduced me to one of the people who are in this project, Gerald. And yeah, I don't know. It was interesting for me to be able to think through the ways in which I'd met all of the people that I did interview for this piece, and the ways in which I've been invested in the idea of community and how tricky of a concept it can be. That's all. Oh, no one can hear me. Sorry. Well, now you can. Did you hear anything? I mean, oh, I can't hear you, Daniel. Okay, cool. Dan, it was hard to hear. Okay. Well, I mean, I will say more later.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Marie. Yeah, we heard it. It was just quiet. But we heard it, and thanks so much for sharing. And I really encourage everyone to go check out the rest of Marie's film on the Power Map archive site. So, essentially the rest of our time together, I have one more question that I'm going to ask all the artists to respond to, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, and that'll be our hour together. And so, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is that, this project really came about as an exploration of how to depict power. And how that has changed over time, right? So we've got some examples here in the original murals. We've got some examples in the activations that people did. But one of the things that I realized while working on the project is that there's the line between power and empowerment is sometimes ambiguous when it comes to making images. And so while I was kind of thinking through this, I came across the book that the organizer Alicia Garza recently released, which is called The Purpose of Power. I encourage you all to check it out. And there was this quote that really kind of captured this ambiguity for me. And so I'll read it for you real quick. Most people, when they think about power, are actually envisioning empowerment. I think that those things are related but different. Power is the ability to impact and affect the conditions of your own life and the lives of others. Empowerment, on the other hand, is feeling good about yourself, akin to having high self-esteem. Empowerment is what happens when people come together and don't feel alone anymore and don't feel like they're the only ones who experience what they do. unless movement is transformed into power, not much will change about our environments. And so what I want to just ask each of the artists to respond to before we start our Q&A is, if you all could just say a little bit about you learned about power or empowerment when trying to make images like you did for this project. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing screens so we can see each other. And I'd love to, we can just go in the same order that we just went. So starting with Courtney and Mark, and love to hear your all's take on that.
Yeah.
I can always go back into the image if you need me to show anything.
I think we'd always prefer the work than our tired, pandemic exhausted faces. But yeah, I mean, I think just to immediately respond to that, you know, I think like, I do think that empowerment is a precursor to like building, demanding, and actualizing power. And that, you know, these were like one-day workshops with groups of folks that we had not developed relationships with in a lot of our work in Philly and beyond. They're multi-year-long projects that are about deeply building power, in a lot of cases with folks who are coming home from prison, to make art to not only like help free people who are currently incarcerated, but to destroy stereotypes and push for policies that can keep others free. But the precursors for any of that work is long, slow, durational work to build trust, build relationships. And I think in this project, what we were able to do was, you know, focus more on that part of it, you know, where we were using a collaborative photo making process that slowed things down, that brought people to create, you know, a small amount of images that multiple people were coding, and in the process learning about each other, opening up to each other. And there's still power in that, like a foundation, I think, to build off of. But yeah.
And there's so much power simply in the act of bringing people together. And that's something we're also painfully aware of now. And that's something that we were able to do both in our workshop and our culminating event, where, you know, we were able to share food and conversation and hugs with people, which is something that seems so foreign and fairy tale like now. But we were able to do that, and within that moment itself, there was so much power and beauty. We're thinking too about just the power itself of public images, and how, you know, this year alone, there's going to be an estimated $240 billion spent on advertisements, which is both gross and speaks to the importance of visuals around us, right? So those things can promote the idea of things that we need, or they can promote important things that we actually do need. But either way, I think that those that we're encountering in public space have an impact, like a dramatic impact on our minds and how we perceive things. So creating alternative images can be a way to counter some of those things that we're constantly facing.
Yeah, and like, I think as an example of like how, you know, I think in those initial workshops, and I don't know if it's possible to actually share the ones from the event, but, you know, we like to think of our work in ripples. So like we use these sort of collaborative art making practices to kind of build trust, build relationships. But then those are also creating art that a secondary audience is seeing. So, you know, these workshops, work is created that then gets brought into a larger public. So the ripple grows, the concentric circle grows. You see here members of Tripod sharing their photos, sharing their dreams, sharing their stories. This then invited other audience members to add their own vision. So this is like a small example of like, okay, if you build from a space of trust, it can ripple out and out and out. Their work is, Tripod is exhibited at Drexel, and it's gone to conferences as well, and has also been published in a book. And from from this workshop, we did build a relationship with Tripod and had a secondary workshop where members of Tripod were taking photos of vacant lots in the Palatine neighborhood and drawing on top buildings that were people-centered, community-centered design ideas that were, the only sort of design challenge was you can't build something that would displace anybody in the community. So what could you be creating if you were in power, if you were in control of developing sort of the future and imagining and visualizing the future of your neighborhood, what would that neighborhood look like? And yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney and Mark. What about you, Nichelle and Marianne?
So I think we were going through the same line because we also work with communities, and I think we wanted to bring empowerment by denouncing the recolonization of our communities. Where even the diaspora we get displaced and gentrified, and using the resistant Black Puerto Rican flag as another layer, visual, tactile, as a reminder that we're still a colony and second-class citizens, but we still have a voice and we have the power to reclaim those spaces.
Yes, I think we also learned that, and it's very interesting, that maybe the Puerto Rican community in Philadelphia is less radical than we thought, or perhaps they're radical in different ways, right, that we couldn't read. But we had a stronger imagery and proposal at the beginning, but it wasn't accepted by the community, you know, when we first introduced it, and Daniel helped us a lot with that. Unlike probably the past decades, the current diaspora communities are apparently more merged with the United States culture than those of past decades, right?
Mm-hmm. But I think that is also interesting because when we work with the communities and diverse groups of people with different values and world views, and in 22 with our community work, we have learned that the power is within the community. We just tried to empower them, reclaiming those spaces. It's about space and about retaking it and getting together, like Courtney and Mark said.
Yes, yeah. And we just wanna end it by saying that we're very grateful with Daniel Tucker's time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Daniel. Thanks a lot, yes, for your interest and for the great opportunity.
Thanks to you both as well, but I also, you know, want to acknowledge that one of the things that we really discovered in this process too was that this mural has a completely kind of hidden history, right? And so, you know, a lot of the other ones that are featured in this project have something that's like a little bit more legible as a kind of conventional process that was used to establish the mural. But in fact, the Puerto Rican Statue of Liberty that 22 Studio responded to, it started out as a kind of a graffiti activist mural. And then it was, you know, sort of gradually through a process, which you'll have to read about on the project website, you know, was incorporated into the mural arts collection. So even that, I think, you know, has there's something to read into that about what you're saying, Marianne, about, you know, some of the kind of layers that happen in a diaspora over time and over years, that there's also some of that is present literally in how the mural, you know, came into existence and maybe people's associations with it. So there's more to say about all of that, of course. But I want to hand it off to Ken. What do you think? What did you learn about it, power empowerment? Anything else you want to share about the project?
Well, I think that when you look at imaging, or the way that I look at imaging, is understanding like the history of this particular medium, and photography is this particular medium that I'm speaking about. But I know that from the invention of this medium, it has been used as something to oppress and to hold down and to shape narrative around my community, right? So it is powerful to present Black people as they are, with strength, with dignity, in a different light. And that's why I spoke, and you know, I'm understanding who Julius Erving is, and understanding who Dr. J is, and seeing how he's usually presented in his white iconic uniform. It's powerful to see a Black man, regardless of who he is, if you understand the system of white supremacy and the images that are pushed of us. So I know as a young man, I was empowered, if you want to use that language, and seeing Dr. J presented as he was. But I also know that, and actually, if you could just play the video while I speak, one of the things in talking to Eric Honesty II is because he was too young to remember Dr. J. But to walk him through what it meant to me and to other people in that community, because again, I used to live right over there. And even with with certain murals in the city, just get certain respect. 17th and Wallace, there's a certain level of respect that is given. The Dr. J mural, there's a high level of respect given to that. And my thing, even in teaching and working in the community and living in the community, is really just about activating agency, because there's a game that people play with empowerment and power and all of these things, and sometimes nonprofits come and say they're going to give people agency, and understand something. Agency cannot be given. You understand what I'm saying? If anything, we can help activate it. We can maybe strengthen it in certain ways, but we have the power to control our own narrative. And when you're speaking about power, and when you talk about image and imagining who we are as a community, as a people, we have the power to create our own narrative, to tell our own stories, and to show our children who we are. So there is power in all of these images. And actually all my work, quite honestly, because I deal with strength and dignity. I don't deal with anything else. So even if someone is low, I stay with them until they're high. And that's what I like to photograph. And I like to correct you too. I didn't shoot anybody at this event, at this particular activation. I photographed them. I didn't shoot the photographs, I made them. And we took the time, and when you watch the film, I'm just talking to him about what it is to present yourself and to know who you are, and to present your image of yourself to the world, as opposed to believing what the world is telling you about who you are. So I don't know if, hopefully, you know, people can relate to it, but you know, that's what we were trying to do. And I hope that we were able to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I think the project turned out beautifully. And, you know, for those who don't know Ken's work, you know, there's a lot that you can follow online, but also you know, I have to say, I have the real privilege of walking by an installation of Ken's work every single day, which is on the outside of 41st and Haverford, on the old Traction Company and Spiral Q warehouse, and just beautiful installation of fathers, Black fathers with their children, and something I encourage you all to check out. And so, go ahead, Ken.
Thank you for that. But I would say one other thing too, and also the magnitude of and thank you for saying that again, but the magnitude of that particular image of Dr. J is powerful in itself. And Eric II, for any man to see himself, because I did mention the research told us that he cried when he saw it, because he couldn't, even as large as he was in life, to see himself permanently put on a building at that height was powerful. But I will share this with you very quickly. Eric II was also featured at the exhibit we had at the Barnes. And to see himself and his father scaled some 30 some odd feet in the sky was powerful in itself, not only for him as an individual, not only for his father, but for their whole family. And there's power in these things. And I just want to, like, obviously when we made it, I didn't know that was gonna happen, but it was a wonderful full circle moment for me and for him, I would hope. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. So Eva, what about you?
Oh my God, Ken, that was a beautiful vision. I mean, when I think about power, I first come to the thought that, you know, my position as an artist that's being hired puts me in this position of power, in which I'm being asked to represent a community that I actually, you know, I cannot represent everybody's experience or everybody's perspective, or even come close, really. So it puts me in a position also where I'm getting paid and my art is being uplifted. And I feel like there's this dynamic that's often happening. For example, I've been asked by Mural Arts to work on this project because I have the privilege to have been able to take a lot of time to work on my portfolio, and to put myself out there. So a lot of the artists that I might work with or collaborate with might have just as good of a vision to share, but they didn't ask to be put in this role because maybe they don't have as much privilege, so they haven't had as much time to put themselves in certain rooms, etc. So to be in this position, which is again a privilege, how do I do my best to not just empower, but also to give over power? So my immediate thought was, you know, share the financial resources. So in my project, I split with all of my participants all of the money that I was paid. But then, of course, I wanted to include 34 people in my project, and that kind of didn't leave a lot of money for everybody. So that, you know, didn't really feel like a very legitimate way to support somebody's ability to control their own material reality. That said, I try to prioritize Black trans people and, you know, embody the politics that I believe in. Yeah, I tried to write about what it looks like to do right by a community that, as much as for me, I love my community and all I want to do is show everybody how much I love everybody in my work, and all I want to do is to honor everybody and give everybody, you know, what everybody deserves, which is honestly so much more than I have the ability to give. So how in my position as an artist with privilege, often working with people who have completely different life experiences than me, you know, how do I embody that role with as much responsibility as possible and try not to make the same mistakes that people have been making and that we've been collectively learning about. So yeah, I find this question really interesting, and I hadn't thought of the metaphor that's inherent in the title of the project of mapping power until it was brought up later. And I think that this question of like power versus empowerment is really important. I feel like empowerment is already one of those words that is almost irrelevant to use because it's overused, and to make somebody feel good about themselves isn't maybe enough. And then as artists, we are in this position where our work is really important, and we deal in representation, which has a visual power and an actual political importance as well. And at the same time, we can't always, when we're responding to a mural, we can't always change, you know, the material conditions of that neighborhood or that community. So it's tricky.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. Yeah, it is totally tricky, but I feel like you like took on the trickiness and the question with a lot of nuance, and you know, to have like a, you know, an animated image that is then supplemented with this in-depth, you know, epic zine of interviewing everyone. It's like almost like the, you know, the ethics are embodied by having this image with like 60 different footnotes in it, you know, that really engage in depth. And, you know, it makes me wish like every mural that attempted to, you know, depict anyone had a, you know, a supplemental zine to accompany it where we could learn more about the people and the context that led to it. So thanks for modeling that in your work.
Daniel, I appreciate that.
So Marie, what about you?
Yeah, can you guys hear me better this time? Yeah, okay. I will try and speak up. I tried to change my audio source, so we'll see. I've been sort of taking notes, thinking about some things about power that I have been thinking about since you gave us this prompt, but a lot of the work that I do in general, whether it's straight documentary or it's more experimental, is really about place and about memory and history. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's power in knowing where one is from and who one's people are. And for me, that's been a drive in being someone who doesn't have that sort of stability as someone who's part of the African diaspora, as someone who's part of colonization, that process. And so coming to Philly was about sort of creating a home for myself and figuring out how to become part of not just like a community, but like actually creating home and family. And so I wanted to speak on that. And then I wanted to say that there's also this power in being known and recognized. And I think that is seen in the like sort of conversations that I have with the folks that I interview, especially with Ms. Tina or with Aminata. Like, I think that like the idea of empowerment versus power is important. There's like little p and there's big P. And little p is, I think, maybe what we're actually getting at when we talk about empowerment, because I think that like we can't empower someone, but someone can have small p power. So we can have small p power, whereas we can have small p power with our friends and with our family. We can have small p power with our local politics. That's all sort of small p power. And I think that acknowledging that there are folks who are trying to sort of utilize that power to the best of their ability within their like sort of smaller circle, and that process over and over around a larger community can then create a bigger P power. So I wanted to say that. And then and I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about something that Eva said about sort of this ethics of being an artist who collaborates with people who identify as artists, right? Who are not getting paid as artists the way that we're getting paid as artists. And I've been talking to other sort of experimental documentarians and other folks who are documentarians in a similar like context of what I do, about the ethics of payment, which is a big conversation that happens within documentary filmmaking. Like, is it ethical to actually pay someone? I pay people as performers, and so by having performance within the context of most of my documentaries, I'm able to then sort of get around that, where the conversation is not what's being paid for, but it's the actual performance, which a conversation is also a performance, but you know, when it starts getting tricky. And it's an ongoing conversation that I think that we should continue having. And I think that institutions who are hiring artists, who are working with artists within a community who the institution doesn't necessarily have access to without us, should be giving us a budget that allows us to also just redistribute those funds in a way so that we're not then taking from our own pockets when we also need to be able to eat and pay our bills and all of those things as artists, right? And often as also marginalized folks, right? So I think that that is also really important. And then also, like, and thank you so much, Eva, for like saying all those things, because it really like has activated me. But it's like thinking about the way that we also need to like understand the way that capitalism is acting on us to think that we need to do so much with such little resources. If you're going to give me this much resource, I'm going to give you this much product. And I'm not going to then also like unintentionally, because of my desires, end up shortchanging the folks that I'm working with. Like, it's like, how do we scale and how do we remember what our scale needs to be? So those are all like parts of the conversation in power. That's all I got.
That's a lot, Marie. That's a so all you got is a lot. But thank you, Marie. And again, really can't emphasize enough, you all have to go on the website and watch that whole video by Marie, because there's a lot going on there. It's really rich. And so we now have some time. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, and I'm going to read them out loud, and then there's one also there's one for the group, and then there's one for Eva specifically, and then we've got a second one that just came in. So this is from Quentin Williams. Quentin says, "Thank you for your art, your vision, and your hearts. I love all your work. How did this process challenge you to grow as artist, and what from this process might you take forward into your future work?" And while you all get yourselves together, I'm going to give Eva their question as well. So this is from Elisa, and it's for Eva, and it says, "I was curious how you selected the individuals from the LGBTQ community that you represented in the work." So we'll let Eva take that one on one, and then the rest of you take Quentin's question about how you might take this into the future of your work. Any of you?
I can talk about my experience and answering the question about Quentin. I have only 4 years in Philadelphia, and I haven't felt connected to the city. So I think through that project, that was the first step, connecting with a community. And after the summer of 2019, I thought that I was betraying my country, even of being outside and being part of the diaspora. So this gave me an opportunity of reconnect with that side, to reconnect with the Puerto Rican community here, and understand even the importance of the diaspora political work in Philadelphia, and how we are supporting the island and the decolonization of it.
Thank you. Other folks want to take Quentin's question? Or Eva, feel free to dive in.
I can answer the question about how I chose people to be in the mural. I pretty much tried to stick with friends and existing collaborative relationships, people that I trust, people who know me and trust me. I really feel like it's much easier to ask favors from people that, you know, I'm already in relationship with, as folks were talking about earlier. Like deep and long-term relationships are really where true, you know, power and sharing in resources together comes together. So that was like part of it, was like mostly people who I know and work with. Also with a focus on people who felt like they contributed a lot to the history and the scene. So like DJs and activists, significant artists, people that I look up to. And then I also tried to keep like a demographic representation to be true to Philadelphia, in terms of race, but maybe not age, because as a millennial, I mostly don't have as much access to elders, which is too bad. But yeah, I tried to keep like the demographics, the racial demographics looking like Philadelphia.
Thanks, Eva. We have a question from Leslie, who is a friend that used to live in Philadelphia and work at Mural Arts, and so has facilitated processes not unlike the things you all have engaged in, and now is part of the Philly diaspora in Santa Cruz, California. Leslie asked, hi all, I'm curious how you are thinking about the concept of mapping with these pieces. How might these works offer some techniques for or meditations on mapping?
So I have, I just have a thought. Yeah, so I think that like sometimes I think of mapping as sort of a scary process, or as like a dangerous process, in being mapped, in being put on the map as a site to be seen by folks who don't necessarily live in a neighborhood or a community. I think of it as a sort of potentially dangerous dangerous process. And so when Daniel, when you like sort of brought in what power mapping actually like means, at one point I was like, oh, like there are ways in which that's like a revolutionary like process of like understanding where the power is within communities, but it's also a way of like identifying spaces to be sort of toppled. And so like what is the responsibility of the mapper, and what are ways that we can be seen without being taken, right? I guess is maybe the language. So that's what I'm thinking about in terms of mapping.
So was someone else going to hop in on mapping? No, okay. I see Courtney and Mark, go.
I would just like wish that when you went on Google to search for something, Google Maps, that like doing these workshops with Tripod and having folks who long-term residents and new residents in those neighborhoods dream themselves together about what they wanted in those vacant spaces. I wish that when anybody searched on Google, that there was a way that community members could like hack that or hijack that system, so that as you're searching through a neighborhood, you would see what community members wanted there themselves, to sort of subvert those structures. But so it's not something that we're gonna do, but I wish somebody else would do.
I
Thanks.
say that
Thanks.
Puerto Rico, we call the street in front of the governor office, the one that we fired, and we call it the Street of Resistance. So it's called the Calle Fortaleza, and we changed the name so that you can do it.
Thank you so much. So we are coming to our the end of our time together. But one of the things I wanted to acknowledge is that all of these 5 activations took a lot of work to put together. They took a lot of work, especially from the artists, but they also took a lot of work from partner organizations and collaborators and friends. And so each of the artists have put together a thank you list that is on the Public Art Archive catalog for this project. And I want to give a special thanks to everyone at Mural Arts who helped facilitate this project, especially Kathy Poole, who has been a stellar project manager throughout the process. But I also want to give a special thanks to Lori Goldstein in the Public Art Archive, who have taken on the project of presenting this work publicly in an online exhibition format. There's a lot of other people that we thank on the website, and I encourage you to dig through it and look at this work more in depth. You know, last but not least, I want to thank also, you know, the original mural artist and the historic mural activation artist who contributed to this project as well. And so without further ado, we're going to wrap up our program for this evening, but I encourage you to follow all of these artists. If you look on Public Art Archive or on the Mural Arts website, you can find their social media handles and see what they're going to be up to in 2021. And hello, we have a new friend joining us at the end. So, you know, I just want to send huge thanks to the Power Map artists. It's been a complete pleasure to work with you all, and you all have brought, you know, cutting, precision and flexibility and imagination all at the same time, and it's been really incredible. So thank you for your work, and happy end of 2020 almost. Thanks. Thanks everybody.